Joined by Sanusha Naidu. She is Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Good to see you, Sanusha. So the Deputy President finally then interacting with members of Parliament after weeks away due to poor health. How did you make sense, or how did you read his return?
Good afternoon, Tebekile. It's lovely to see you again. I think it was a return that was more of a need to be and a necessity than rather one that he was perhaps willing to do so. Because remember, Monday we had the briefing by the top six regarding the outcomes of the NEC meeting, and he was there. And he mentioned in that in his brief, in that media briefing, his response about being of ill health and unable to attend the Q&A sessions in Parliament. And Parliament has been frustrated by these absent ministers in Parliament, in government, as well as the Deputy President. And I think this was a necessity to appear today. Of course, the issues around the questions about the land reform, ESCOM load shedding on top of the agenda, the farm killings and so forth, didn't really give you a sense of that there's a clear coherence or a clear direction of where it's going. It seemed to be very much the middle of the road, the same old narrative that we've heard before, and it doesn't necessarily tell us anything new from my personal impression of what I've heard the Deputy President say and the answers in terms of the questions posed by members of the NCOP.
And just on that, I want to pick on the load shedding issue. The Deputy President began with an apology and again went back to the government line of the past year about the unbundling of ESCOM. That's going to be concluded, hopefully, by 2022. That's when the government and the leadership at the power utility is hoping that things will finally be in order. But the reality is, as we sit here today, with many South Africans in stage 4 load shedding, there is no other explanation that can be given by the Deputy President or any other person that would be satisfactory to South Africans, except to say, here's a solution and it ends today.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that analysis that you gave. I think that you can't keep reiterating what we already know and then assume that there's going to be a confidence. Apologizing is one thing, but I think telling the nation or telling ordinary South Africans, bear with us even more, the pain is more painful than we anticipate. I mean, people are basically in Cape Town, across the country, there's a heavy winter storm. You're asking people to reduce their electricity consumption and try and be warm in other ways. I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me. This doesn't create the confidence that we should have. And 2022, yes, I mean, you've had a plan that the head of the CEO of ESCOM put together. Mr. Director said 18 months of load shedding. Now, this 18-month window period that we're talking about, yes, we have to deal with it. But the problem here is that when you see 10 generators that have all been in a crisis, it tells you that you're not necessarily dealing with it. They all are basically packing up at one time. So I think the trust deficit just becomes even more painful for government, because 2022 maybe you'll have something tangible, but right now you're not creating the confidence or any kind of level of confidence to say, look here, we've done something.
And just on that, you mentioned Andre de Ruyter, the head of ESCOM. Do you think that he and the rest of his leadership team have faced enough heat, enough scrutiny over the ongoing power cuts? We're now at stage 4, which at this stage is going to take us into the weekend and possibly the next week.
I mean, I think there has to be some level of oversight for this board and for the management of ESCOM. I mean, yes, they've been given a difficult task. I mean, nobody will want that position in terms of trying to bring back a utility that is really in the wilderness and it's nowhere. It seems to be at times unsalvageable. But the problem is that how do you get there? How does that oversight happen? Because, you know, this again is an SOE. There are complications. We see the challenges around questions of governance and where the governance deficit has been in this whole management of the ESCOM crisis that we've seen, not just when Mr. De Ruyter took over. I'm not absolving him, but it's a crisis that has been there for in terms of a chronic nature, an acute nature. It's endemic. So the challenge here is whether or not we fast-track and expedite some of that independent power pool producers. Now, I know there's a plan. There has to be something that has to basically give us some kind of stopgap measure to deal with the crisis. Because as long as we wait for ESCOM to come with 2022, I think as you rightly point out, we're going to suffer this kind of endemic crises in terms of our load shedding. But remember, it's not going to grow the economy. We've been through a COVID-19 crisis. We're in a COVID-19 crisis. This economy was ailing before that. And as the economy moves into a more relaxed regulation lockdown measure, businesses can't operate.
The other issue, of course, was that of farm murders. We've had several high-profile cases being reported on in the media over the past few weeks. The Deputy President then condemning the murders that are taking place on the country's farms, saying law enforcement agencies must do their jobs or their job to crack these cases. There had been a view in the country that the issue of murders on farms in this country is not getting enough attention. Do you think it's finally there?
I think the fact of the matter is that it's on the agenda. I think that we can't deny. It's there. They recognize it. They see the real challenge, the difficulty, the gruesomeness, and the impact that this is having in terms of our landscape. But I also think that you can't just then say, oh, let the security agencies or the police or the police service needs to do their job. You need to capacitate them to do their job. I mean, it's quite frightening, not just the farm murders, but just looking at the level of violent crimes in South Africa. And I think that, again, Thembekile, if you come back to the point of confidence and trust, it's one of those areas where, as a deficit, it's growing, the trust in our police force.